Just before the super typhoon hit, my parents kicked me out of the house. They said it was because they worried there wouldn't be enough food, and having me there meant more mouths to feed, which would leave my brother, his wife, and their kids hungry. The typhoon swept me away, and I got crushed on the street before I even got a chance to claim my winning lottery ticket worth millions. When I opened my eyes again, I had gone back to 5 hours before the typhoon arrived. Before they could kick me out again, I offered to move out. My parents praised me for being sensible. My brother and sister-in-law thought I was smart, and my nephews laughed that I was foolish. What they didn't know was that when the typhoon hit, their house would collapse into rubble. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself unharmed on my familiar single bed, and the excruciating pain was suddenly gone. Realizing I had been given a second chance at life, I quickly checked my backpack. Thank goodness, the lottery ticket I had hidden was still there. I clutched it tightly, crying tears of joy as memories of the previous life flashed through my mind. In my last life, the weather forecast had warned that the super typhoon would land near our town around 7 p.m. In the afternoon, my parents suddenly asked me to travel over 4 hours by car to the countryside to look after my grandparents. Typhoons are unpredictable, and such a trip was extremely dangerous. I refused and demanded to know the truth. That's when my mom reluctantly admitted that she and dad worried about not having enough food at home. With the supply lines cut off by the typhoon, they feared my brother's family might starve. It was hard to believe. Just the night before, after my mom had called urgently asking for supplies, I got up early to buy plenty of vegetables, meat, and fruit in the city. Then I spent over 2 hours on a bus to deliver it to them. Everyone had been all smiles when they received the supplies, only to turn around and claim there wasn't enough, insisting I leave. No matter how I begged, they wouldn't change their minds. Even when I promised to only drink water and not touch the food, they shoved me out when I wasn't looking and slammed the door shut. I yelled and pounded on the door until my hands were sore and my voice was hoarse, but no one opened up. All I heard was my dad's voice saying, "Life and death are fated. Blessings and misfortunes are in heaven's hands." They knew there was no transportation on the streets, and in the typhoon, I would be left to fend for myself. Dying once taught me that this family was full of ungrateful people who didn't deserve my sincerity. Later, amidst terrifying winds and rain, I was lifted high into the air, slammed into a coconut tree, and died a gruesome death. To some relief, after my death, I floated up above and saw their self-built house collapse entirely in the typhoon, becoming a pile of rubble. Seeing this, I could finally close my eyes. What goes around comes around. Thinking about all this, I checked the time. There were just under 5 hours before the typhoon would hit again. I decided to leave this dangerous house immediately. Even if they didn't kick me out, I wasn't staying for their sake. I packed my lottery ticket, ID, and bank cards, grabbed a few clothes, and headed out. Hey, Dad, Mom, brother, and everyone else, I'm heading out for a bit. My sudden appearance made the room go silent. Pretending I didn't know they were discussing kicking me out, my mom asked, surprised, "Jane, up from your nap so soon? Didn't you stay up late last night? With the typhoon coming tonight, you're heading out now?" I smiled. Didn't Grandma and Grandpa mention they weren't feeling well in the group chat yesterday? Since the typhoon is near, I plan to stay in the countryside for a couple of days to look after them. Hearing this, everyone relaxed. My sister-in-law, who's usually the suspicious type, still asked, "Aren't you worried about encountering the typhoon on the way?" My eldest nephew, Oscar, busy playing his game, muttered without even looking up, "Idiot." Like always, no one responded to his foul mouth. I pretended not to care, explaining, "Nah, it's still early. With so many people at home, I'm worried about the shortage of food and water during the typhoon, and you can't buy anything now. I'd better stay with Grandma and Grandpa since they are fewer in number. That way, there's more for everyone else." Their expressions softened. Mom even held my hand, smiling. "Jane, you really are thoughtful." Dad took a drag on his cigarette, nodding. "Raised you well. You've shown some sense today." Only my second sister-in-law scoffed, saying to her husband, "She's just an outsider. Good she knows her place." I ignored her, turning to my brother. "Hey, can I borrow your van? There won't be any buses now." My sister-in-law's face immediately darkened, so I added quickly, "Oh, I heard Uncle's orchard had a great harvest, and the pigs are almost ready for market. I just got my bonus, so we'll bring back some extra fruit and fresh meat." Hearing this, my sister-in-law's face lightened, and my brother handed me the keys with a grin. If you need the van, no problem, just fill it up with meat. Don't worry about the fruit too much. Promising to do so, I grabbed the dog carrier as I walked by the stairs. Oscar finally looked up from his game, yelling, "Stop, don't take that dumb dog." Lucas, the second nephew, rushed over and tried pushing me to take the dog carrier. "It's our dog Slave. If you take it, it'll tell Grandpa to beat you." The fourth nephew, usually glued to his phone, glanced up too. "Yeah, Jane, leave Rich. When the typhoon hits, we can have a dog meat feast." Hearing them, Rich whimpered, pawing its crate. A chill ran down my spine, but I kept my cool. Lying, "You all didn't want to pay for Rich's shots, and if you eat it, you might catch rabies. Anyway, keeping a dog during the typhoon is extra trouble. Better let me take it to Grandma and Grandpa's to guard the house." This time, my second sister-in-law even agreed with me. "Yeah, take that smelly dog. I think Lucas might be getting fleas from it." She held Lucas back and signaled for me to leave quickly with the dog. Oscar tried again to grab the dog. Mom and sister-in-law held him back. The sister-in-law scolded, "Same rotten dog. Don't you worry about getting sick from it." My mom complained too. "Jane, if you take the dog out, don't bring it back. Too many germs." Amid all the chaos, I hurried out the door with Rich. As I left, Lucas yelled at me, "Fool, you'll get blown away along with that dead dog." That brat almost made me blow my top, but then I glanced back at our house, and somehow all the anger just disappeared. I even gave Lucas a meaningful smile. I hope when the typhoon hits, he keeps his mouth as nasty as it is now. Once in the car, I opened the dog crate and petted Rich's head, assuring him, "My Rich isn't a sick dog. Rich is the best little pup in the world." Rich seemed to sense we were escaping. His eyes were bright with anticipation. He's really intuitive, probably the only one at home who truly cares about me. In my previous life, when I was outside begging to be let in, Rich was the only one at home barking like crazy, hoping someone would help me. Oscar and Lucas, those little brats, nearly kicked him half to death and even tried to set his fur on fire with a lighter. But Rich didn't care about his burns. He jumped from the second-floor balcony, limped his way to me, and stayed by my side. Sadly, the typhoon was too strong, and he got swept away and died on the street. This time around, I will never abandon him. We drove off in a beat-up van toward the city. I wasn't about to head to the countryside to see my grandparents. Besides the trip being long and dangerous, their little house probably couldn't handle the typhoon. My dad always bragged about being the eldest grandson, yet he pushed the responsibility of taking care of them onto me, their least favored granddaughter. It's quite the twisted idea of filial piety. Like our family, I have 4 brothers, but I haven't seen them be of much use. The car quickly reached the outskirts a couple of hours away. It was stifling hot before the typhoon hit, with no wind, and the sky was a spectacular purplead. At this point, flights were grounded and trains stopped running. There wasn't any other way to escape out of town. I didn't go back to the teacher's dorm at school. Instead, I found a 5-star hotel that allows pets, swiped my credit card, and booked a room for a week. The hotel was renowned, supposedly resilient enough to endure many high-level disasters, and had received numerous global awards. Plus, its location, near the mountains and away from the sea, made it one of the safest places in the city. I specifically asked for a suite on a lower floor to feel safer. After all, no one understands the typhoon's power better than me. Once checked in, I spent a fortune hiring a runner to buy enough food, drinkable water, and supplies for Rich and me to last a few days. After the typhoon passes, I can cash in my lottery winnings and these expenses won't matter. Having prepped all that, I had time for a nice bath and gave Rich one too. Then I filled a bathtub with water as a backup and charged 10 power banks to full. Looking out the window, the typhoon was drawing near, with wind starting to bend branches and all sorts of light stuff floating in the air. Distant dark clouds rolled in, against a surreal backdrop of radiant twilight, hinting at massive destructive power. There weren't many people or cars outside anymore. Sensible folks had already returned home to brace for the storm. I cuddled Rich, charged my phone, and played games. Strangely, though this terrifying typhoon was imminent, I felt the most at peace I had in a long time. After all, living in a family like this one was suffocating. Though my mom always brainwashed me into thinking our family wasn't sexist, saying she could have aborted me since there were already 4 boys. I found out the truth when my dad got drunk and spilled the beans. Apparently, My birth was an accident. The fortune teller had said he'd have 5 sons and hit the jackpot. But several wrong ultrasound results led to me. He told me I'd owe the William family a son forever. It's absurd. My whole life feels like a joke. I woke up and realized that I wouldn't stand up for myself even when mistreated. I just visited home less and distanced myself from the family, but could never completely cut ties. It's laughable that, in a typhoon, people I cared for pushed me out without a second thought. Now, with a second chance, it hit me. If they don't appreciate me, I won't bother. Thinking about all this, I fell asleep on the couch without realizing it. I was jolted awake by a sudden phone call. I checked the time. It was 4 p.m. The typhoon was an hour away from hitting them. My dad's tone was harsh. You've been out 4 hours. Still not at your grandpa's. They are waiting for you to cook. Stop dawdling. I bluffed. Oh, stopped for gas. Got them some food. Got delayed. Almost there. My dad snorted, easing up a bit. Then eat less yourself. As a young person, prioritize elders in everything. A few scoldings shouldn't make you upset your grandma. I chuckled coldly and agreed. After the call, I opened our home's surveillance app. My parents ran a small fishery, not exactly poor, and had built a 5-story house early on, but with 4 brothers, each got a floor, and I lived with my parents on the first floor. Back when there were many thieves in town, my mom tricked me into paying for home surveillance. Cameras covered every level, accessible on every family phone. My brothers claimed to help at the fish pond, but really they just loitered around, especially fond of playing poker. Just as I suspected, doing nothing. My brothers and sisters-in-law were playing card games, while others were gaming at another table. I exited the surveillance app and kept refreshing the news for satellite images of the typhoon, keeping a close watch on its path. The eye of the typhoon was shifting fast. No wonder the forecast was inaccurate in my last life. My family never watched such news. They'd rather play cards or games, scroll through videos, or watch mindless shows. If they checked current affairs occasionally, they'd know the typhoon sped up and strengthened. At least they'd gain a bit of survival awareness and think about safety measures. But it's not my problem anymore. Since the hotel was still taking orders, I called the front desk and ordered a big seafood feast. The 5-star hotel was quick. Within half an hour, a robot delivered the meal to my room. I was about to dig in when my phone rang again. It was my mom. As I leisurely enjoyed my meal, she anxiously asked, "Jane, your grandparents said you're not home yet. Be honest with me. Did you not go? You know you don't have to lie if you don't want to go." I swallowed a piece of salmon before answering. "Mom, it's not that I didn't want to go. I just took a wrong turn earlier. I'm on the right track now. Tell them I'm almost there." She seemed relieved and hesitated before asking, "Since you took a wrong turn, do you want to come back home first? There's something going on." I was confused. I'm almost there. Turning back would be too much trouble, and I might run into the typhoon. She paused and said again, "You should come back. The typhoon won't hit for another 2.5 hours, so you have time." I sighed. "Why do you need me to come back? What's so urgent?" My mom hesitated for a while before saying, "Your third sister-in-law isn't feeling well and wants lemon chicken from town. Can you drive and get some?" Silence was both my disbelief and the fact that I was munching on fish. It's the first time she's pregnant and she has cravings, and she won't eat anything else. My mom continued explaining the importance. Suddenly my third brother took the phone. "Sis, can you grab some chicken for her since you're driving and it's just a short drive?" I responded, "Why can't you get it for your wife? It's just a 10-minute walk." "Is she pregnant with my baby?" My brother seemed annoyed. "Jane, what are you saying? It's dangerous out there. What if I get swept away by the typhoon? So it's okay for me to be the scapegoat." At that point, I hung up, not wanting to waste another minute. I figured with that kind of time, he could just write his will instead of worrying about chicken. My brother kept calling back, but I ignored him and put my phone on Do Not Disturb. After slowly enjoying my feast, I checked the time. It was exactly 5 o'clock. The super typhoon should have hit the town by now. I wondered how things were going over there. Even in this sturdy hotel room, I could hear the terrifying wind outside. Looking out the window, it was getting wild. Things flying everywhere. I opened our home security camera app to get a look. The house was chaotic, even through the screen. You could feel the wind was much stronger than here. The windows were visibly shaking, making the furniture sway. My fourth brother lived on the top floor, and the ceiling and all windows were leaking water badly. But my brothers and sisters-in-law didn't notice. They were still absorbed in their poker game. My dad was downstairs, sweeping water coming through the front door, grumbling and cursing. How could Jane be so heartless? The typhoon's here, and she didn't even go to her grandparents. And she didn't get chicken for her sister-in-law. Who knows where she ran off to? Probably went back to her dorm in the city to relax. Yeah, we're worried sick here, my eldest sister-in-law added while watching her 2 kids in the living room, not joining the poker game. Suddenly, she froze. Mom, what if something happened to Jane in the typhoon since she's not answering her phone? My mom's face turned worried. During a break from the poker game, everyone came over to grab some water and fruit. My second sister-in-law jumped in, comforting. No way, Mom. Jane's in a car. She can easily find somewhere to hide. My dad was impatient. That stubborn girl. She's just acting out. Why would anyone want a daughter-in-law like her? My mom assisted my third sister-in-law, smiling affectionately at her belly, explaining patiently, I'm just worried about her on the road. It took us over 20 years to raise her. It'd be such a shame if something happened right when we were about to get a dowry. My third sister-in-law's eyes flickered as she chimed in casually. It's no big deal, Mom. You don't always need a living person to get a dowry. The others looked at her, and she continued jokingly. Not long ago, the young son of the richest man in town passed away. They were looking for a ghost marriage, and offered a dowry of 7 figures. 7 grand, my eldest sister-in-law asked. My third sister-in-law smiled mysteriously. 7 figures, everyone gasped. My second sister-in-law exchanged glances with her, muttering, wow, rich folks really play by different rules. The dowry for a ghost marriage is even higher than for living folks. Mom, if Jane really got into trouble, it'd be her good fortune. My third brother agreed. Exactly, that kind of fortune is hard to come by. It beats her working as a school teacher, slaving away for a bit of money. Hearing this was a slap in the face. I couldn't believe it. I had always thought they sent me out into the storm simply out of selfishness. If I hadn't heard it firsthand, I couldn't have imagined such evil intentions. All the talk about scarce food was just an excuse. From the start, they plotted to send me out in hopes of profiting from my misfortune, with an easy $1 million blood-stained payday. A living person isn't as valuable as a dead one. So as a girl, I was disposable. How is that different from murder? I was equally stunned and relieved by my family's impending demise. I watched the cameras with a cold smile. They were already planning how to spend the money. My eldest sister-in-law looked hopeful. With $1 million, we could transfer Oscar and Lucas to a city school. Right? My second sister-in-law nodded. Yeah, the old man always wanted to switch to an electric car. Lucas thinks the car's too old and refuses to be seen in it. My third sister-in-law chuckled. There's a new maternity center in the city. It's said to be fantastic. Only 10 grand a month. Mom wouldn't have to help with my postnatal care anymore. My mom nodded agreeingly, concluding, with the typhoon hitting the fishing ground, who knows how much loss. At least now we'll have money for the fourth brother's wedding. At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. I shut off the surveillance, unable to watch any longer. No matter how much my heart was deadened, seeing it unfold was physically painful. Rich was lying quietly by my feet, looking up at me worriedly. I hugged him, trying to calm down, telling myself to hold on a little longer, that everything would be over soon. But before long, my phone started blowing up again. It was my mom calling. This time, I picked up. Her voice sounded urgent, not as cheerful as it did on the surveillance. Jane, where on earth did you go? We can't find you anywhere. Would you come home for a bit? The typhoon's coming. I'm scared to death. The power and water are out. Oscar and Lucas are fussing about wanting to play with the tablet, but it's out of battery. Could you bring some power banks from outside? I have a headache. I almost laughed. Am I supposed to have some kind of immunity or superpower against typhoons? They all want me to deliver stuff in this weather. Riding on the despair I felt earlier, I turned to a crying tone. Mom, I heard third sis-in-law wanted to have chicken, so I started heading back. But I had bad luck and ran into the typhoon. My car can't move now. Someone come rescue me. It's so scary. Everything's flying around in the wind. There was a pause on the other end. You really started heading back. There's quite a storm here. Is your car okay? For now, I'm at a shelter, but I can't hold on for long. You need to come save me. I've got several power banks. I cried desperately for help, like I was really caught in a storm. Second sister-in-law calmly picked up the phone. Jane, don't panic. Send your location to my phone. We'll figure out a way to pick you up. Okay. I randomly found a highway location and sent it over. Meanwhile, I heard someone in the background whispering, with a location, it'll be easier to handle later. Otherwise, we'll have to search everywhere. How hilarious. I could feel the storm's intensity over the phone. They don't seem to care where their bodies would end up floating, but were worried about retrieving mine. I pretended the wind hit me again and hung up. When they called back, I couldn't be bothered to answer. The signal was indeed getting weaker, cutting in and out. When they couldn't reach me by phone, they moved to harass me in the family group chat. My mom was sending a lot. 60-second voice messages popping up every now and then. Jane, the windows are shaking, and the water's rising. Come back and help clean up the water. Jane, several windows are shattered, and furniture is flying out. It's terrifying. Drive back home and rescue some stuff. Our house is practically turned into a shell. Hurry back and help your mom. Jane, the street has turned into a river. The first floor's water is already a meter high. I'm scared to death. Your brother and sister-in-law moved up to the 4th floor to play cards, and we've moved to the 2nd. The house won't get submerged, will it? Come drive us out of here. Jane, come on, bring us some food at least. Oscar and Lucas are hungry and want snacks, but they are all on the 1st floor, and no one's daring to go down there. Other relatives seeing my mom's messages were shocked and left comments. Jane went out during a typhoon. Oh my god, what's wrong with the grown-ups? Letting a child run out during a typhoon. Yane's out of her mind. I quietly replied, no worries, aunties, uncles, and cousins. Dad said he was worried about grandma and grandpa being alone. I was driving to take care of them. Nonsense, you're sending Jane to her death. In this weather, is your dad out of his mind? Why aren't your brothers taking care of the grandparents? Maybe the criticism was too much. My parents cracked and explained. Yane's a good kid. She knows him not well, and volunteered to care for grandma and grandpa. Besides, when she left, the typhoon was 7 hours away. How could we know it would hit early? Yes, and I told her to come back quickly, but she wouldn't. She's taking shelter somewhere safer. Our house is suffering more than she is. The relatives couldn't say much more and offered some comforting. As long as Yane's safe, that's the most important thing. So scary. Auntie, don't worry except for the top and bottom floors. At least the 2nd and 3rd floors are safe. Just stay put and don't wander around. The sisters-in-law not playing cards also chimed in for my parents. You all don't understand. Little Jane wasn't answering her phone or messages earlier. We were scared to death. Our parents were also worried about our elders, and Jane insisted on taking care of them. We have lots of elderly and kids. The men need to stay and hold things down at home. Heh, the men just wanted to stay and play cards. It'd be too easy if they just died like that. To keep stringing them along, I sent another message. Don't worry, family, I found a way to avoid the typhoon and will be back home with supplies soon. Once that message was sent, the group went silent for a while. I guess they weren't happy that I hadn't perished and actually found a way back. Second sister-in-law awkwardly texted, as long as you're okay. Through the screen, I could feel her disappointment. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. It was quiet for a good while before my phone buzzed again. It was still my mom's endless voice messages, each more urgent than the last, but she dared not post in the group, only bombarding me with private messages. But now, her fear was no longer an act, nearly crying and shouting, Jane, forget the food, come back and get us. The 1st floor's completely flooded, and the roof's about to be blown off. The house is leaking everywhere. There's almost nowhere to stay. Jane, what do we do? Your 4th brother's arm was smashed by a falling fan. We need to get to the hospital, but we're too scared to go out. Come get him to the hospital. We can't just let him be crippled. I thought sarcastically. What's stopping you? When I was swept away by the typhoon before, did he do anything back then? I ignored her, even without seeing it firsthand. My room's windows were shaking constantly. It wasn't hard to imagine how bad the situation was there. Jane, are you coming to get us or not? A fine way to raise an ungrateful child. Are you just gonna leave your family to die while you're safe? My dad finally couldn't help but jump into the chaos. Disappointed. Well, I intend to make them even more desperate. I casually sent a location near my home and replied, on my way. Almost there. My mom replied instantly, okay, Jane, just get here soon. The roof of the top floor has flown off. A bunch of branches flew inside. Lucas got hurt. Hurry back so we can take him to the hospital. Meanwhile, I nonchalantly ate a kiwi. I could hear Lucas crying loudly in the background through her voice message. Then, my sister-in-law's unexpected shout came through. "Mom, the balcony's down too." My mom's voice message abruptly stopped. I glanced at the time. The house's complete collapse was supposed to happen about now. The foundation and load-bearing walls must be near their limits. And the walls are probably cracking and leaning. I wondered if those 4 brothers of the 5 sons' success plan were still thinking about getting that $1 million from me, just as I thought they wouldn't bother me anymore. My mom video called me in a panic. Surprisingly, she was able to connect despite the unstable signal. This time, I accepted the call without hesitation. Time to show them my situation, or else they'd be clueless even if they died. "Jane, didn't you say you were almost here? Why haven't you come yet? Your 3rd sister-in-law is in labor too. Our house is shaking. Did you see it? Will it collapse? Are we going to die?" My mom shouted hysterically, spewing tears and snot, not even paying attention to me. The signal was weak, but 2nd and 3rd sisters-in-law started to see my surroundings clearly and got furious. "Jane, you're not coming to take us, are you? Mom, look at her sitting in a nice room, all fancy and safe. Doesn't look like there's a typhoon at all." I denied it. How could it be safe here? Even my glass windows are shaking. "Oh, by the way, my power's out too. Didn't you notice it got darker?" I'm quite happy with the hotel I chose. It feels very safe overall. "Oh, and Rich is here too. Say hi to everyone." "Rich?" I picked up Rich and looked at the camera. "Jane, how can you still laugh? Are you even human? You're treating a dead dog better than us. Isn't your heart cold?" My dad yelled, his voice breaking. "Who else should I treat well if not Rich? You all know, in this family, who has treated me with the most sincerity. When you kicked me out during the typhoon, did you even consider your humanity?" I coldly questioned. But words don't faze thick-skinned people. My sisters-in-law were furious. My dad said angrily, "Jane, I don't care what you did before. Get here now, or I won't have you as a daughter." "Fine, I've played the Williams daughter role long enough. Whoever wants to be, can. Find any of your sons, each is capable enough." The camera shook more fiercely. My mom's terrified face got closer. "What about us? Are you just going to watch us die? Jane, how can you be so heartless? You're going to hell for not helping your own mom." I chuckled. "Didn't Dad say, life and death are up to fate? Fortune and misfortune lie in heaven. You always say, grass ash can't patch walls. A daughter can't support a mother. I'm just a girl, what can I do?" No one bothered me anymore because, as the video ended, I heard a loud crash with painful screams. I figured the house must have collapsed. I went on airplane mode and decided not to deal with their mess until the typhoon passed. Holding Rich, I stared blankly at the raging storm outside. A whole day and night passed before the worst part of the super typhoon ended. But floods, collapses, and accidents were everywhere, making it impossible to go out. Many old trees were uprooted, houses and public facilities destroyed, and water and power outages lasted 3 days. Many people lost their livelihoods and family members, and many lost their comfortable homes overnight due to the disaster. Nature's power showed how small we humans are. I felt lucky to be reborn, and winning the lottery was more than enough. I planned to help those in need as much as I could. 3 days later, when it was safe to go out, I left the hotel to grab some clothes from my school dorm. I planned to handle family affairs once the police notified me, but just as I left, I got a call from the hospital saying my relatives were being treated in the city's hospital, and I should rush over. I wasn't convinced, but went to the hospital anyway to confirm. Arriving at the emergency room, my mom's and my eldest sister-in-law's cries echoed in the hallway. My heart sank. Could it be the house never collapsed? I waited for a while before walking over. It was indeed my mom and sister-in-law, with a boy sitting nearby, maybe Oscar. They looked awful, hair messy, clothes torn, and visibly injured. My mom spotted me, stared for a minute, then rushed over intending to slap me. She forgot her right arm was in a cast. Raising her hand worsened her injury, and she screamed. My eldest sister-in-law saw me, spat on me. "Jane, you heartless person, how dare you show your face? Did a dog eat your conscience?" My mom found her release and sat on the floor in the busy hospital hallway, crying out, "How unlucky I am, raising an ungrateful child for 25 years. When the typhoon came, she abandoned the family, just drove off to a fancy hotel, caring nothing about those at home. Oh man, I've been hit hard. I lost 3 out of 4 sons, and the one left has a broken hand. My daughter-in-law and my chubby grandkid are gone too. And another daughter-in-law, who was pregnant, miscarried at 5 months. Oh, also, their grandmother got swept away by the flood. My husband too. His legs got crushed by a wall, and now has paralyzed. I really regret having raised a jinx. A total disaster. It's like the world is unfair. So unfair. Why wasn't it you that died? People passing by stopped, shocked by what they heard. The first sentence was bad enough, but there were still so many more, and each one was about losing someone. It's probably one of the saddest stories in the whole disaster area. Folks looked at her with sympathy, and a few of the women tried to help her up. But when they looked at me, their eyes were mostly filled with disdain, even disgust. After what she said, I got a pretty good idea. Looks like my parents, sisters-in-law, brother, and even Oscar survived. But they are all hurt pretty bad. I watched her with no expression, as she cried out each of my alleged sins. The doctors wanted to tell her not to yell outside the emergency room, but seeing how upset she was, they just tried to gently calm her down. At that moment, I felt like the worst person in the world, like I'd taken out my whole family or something. I didn't hold back, and loudly questioned, "Can I ask everyone, does the typhoon listen to me? Did my house collapse and kill my family because I asked the typhoon to do it? My mom keeps saying it's my fault they died, but is it because I died? You guys planned to kick me out before the typhoon, right? You said you were afraid there wouldn't be enough food and drink during the storm, and didn't want to take care of me, right? I didn't want to make things hard for you, so I left on my own. After I left, all I wanted was to find someplace safe to stay alive. What did I do wrong?" People around started questioning her accusations. I mean, come on, how could a young girl like me cause so much destruction? My sister-in-law angrily pointed at me. "So you admit you were lying to us the whole time? You were safe from the start, right? You tricked us into driving back to get us. If you hadn't lied, we would have already," I interrupted her, "would have escaped. You knew how bad the typhoon was. There's no way you could drive. Yet you kept asking me to send food and power banks, to take others to the hospital. What was your real intention? And can you honestly say you weren't hoping for me not to come back?" She was at a loss for words, just mumbling. People around started murmuring, "You can't blame a natural disaster on a single person. In bad weather, everyone just wants to survive, right? Asking a single girl to save an entire family is too much. It doesn't work that way. Blame it on bad luck." Just then, the emergency room doors opened, and a doctor came out with a grim look. "I'm sorry, we couldn't save the patient's legs, they had to be amputated." Another doctor followed. "I'm sorry, we couldn't save the patient's arm either, it had to be amputated. It's been 2 or 3 days already, so keeping the limbs was unlikely." Then my mom heard this news and fainted. The doctors rushed to help her. My sister-in-law came over, angrily told me to scram. Not bothered, I turned to leave. Then the nurse, unaware of what just happened, asked for the hospital fees. My sister-in-law was furious. "Don't you have any decency? When our families suffered so much, and you're asking for money? The typhoon wrecked our house. Where are we supposed to find the cash? Ask her." She pointed at me, just as the elevator doors closed. By the time she realized and ran to catch me, I was already in the parking lot. They'll have to figure out the money themselves. I've advised them so many times to get medical insurance, but they wouldn't listen. Instead, they preferred gambling, hoping to strike it rich. I decided to cut ties with them, blocked everyone. I went to the store, bought a few inconspicuous outfits, and discreetly cashed in my lottery ticket once the office reopened. I donated $500,000 to help girls in rural areas, and another $1 million in supplies to the hardest hit disaster zones. With the remaining money, I didn't plan on buying a house since prices were dropping. Instead, I'm looking into studying abroad, in a major I genuinely like. I may not come back, I'll eventually find a place with a good climate and settle there. I'm managing my own finances now, not having to worry about greedy folks enjoying the fruits of my luck. In my previous life, when I found out I'd won the lottery, I wanted to share the good news with my mom, but knowing her favoritism, I didn't tell her the truth. I jokingly asked what she would do if I won $100,000. She seriously said it should be split 5 ways, with my mom and dad getting a share, and one for each brother's family. I was shocked and asked, "What about me? I won it." Without a second thought, she said, "The families raised you all this time. Your little salary was hardly enough to repay the favor. Your brothers are the ones working at home, and will be looking after us old folks. You, being a daughter, won't be there for us when you get married, so before that happens, you should do more for the family." Her words left me speechless. That attitude convinced me not to tell her about the win. A couple of days later, my mom and sister-in-law couldn't pay the medical bills and came to my school for money. But I'd already resigned after claiming my prize. Working locally after graduation was their choice, not mine. It had nothing to do with my interests or dreams. Not finding me, they resorted to basics, calling the police. When the cops showed up, I was renting a nice furnished apartment, studying. My mom brought my sister-in-law, Oscar, my brother helped my grandpa, and my other sister-in-law brought someone recording on a phone. The whole family showed up perfectly at my place. When I opened the door, they seemed more shocked than I was. Seeing the fancy apartment, they were stunned, their eyes shining with greed. Even though my dad's in a wheelchair, he still got that strong-willed dad flavor. Of course, he was the first to lose his cool and fire off. "Jane, are you even human? When disaster hit, you ran off to have a good time. And now the family's all broken, some dead, some crippled. We can't even afford medical bills. And you just ditch your family to live it up. You're worse than an animal." My mom chimed in angrily. "Stop the nonsense. People like her have no conscience. Give the hospital the 20 grand for medical bills. Then, go meet that widower in town. He lost his wife to the flood a couple of days ago. And the dowry is 50 grand. Otherwise, the police will take you to jail." The cop corrected her. "Watch your language. Whether she goes to jail is not up to me but the law. You reported her missing. Now she's found. Let's talk it out." Abandoning family sounds like something from a short video. Maybe it's abandonment. My third sister-in-law paused the recording and stepped up. "Sis, looks like you're living real nice now. If you had told us you were being kept, we all could have enjoyed this too." "Mom, think about it. This house is worth over 3 mil, and you're just asking for 50 grand. The first sister-in-law had an epiphany and quickly added, "Right, at least 3 million. Now the family can't work. Oscar's brain injury needs cash for treatment. We can't let her off easy." I rolled my eyes. "Am I your dad or your mom? Whoever birthed them should be responsible." "Officer, legally my only obligation is to support them after they turn 60. But don't worry, I'll pay up exactly what the law requires when the time comes." The police noted everything. Domestic squabbles like this, they are only mediators. As they tried coming in to argue more, I blocked the door. Security arrived soon after since I had called them earlier. "The property here's great." They kicked my family out. I even asked them to keep non-residents out for good. As they left, they cursed my entire family. I bet thief truly lost their marbles. You'd need some sanity to curse your own family. But I underestimated how low they'd go. They started a live stream to make money, portraying me as the ungrateful daughter. Given the severe typhoon disaster, their sob story easily won public sympathy. A family of older, sick folks streaming live blew up overnight, getting loads of sympathy gifts. Tons of media covered it too. My family got cocky, ramping up their accusations and playing the family love card. Fearing my backlash, they realized forgiving me wouldn't be as profitable. It's the endless generosity of strangers they were after. Best if the drama dragged on and the money poured in. Daughter isn't filial. It's our fault we spoiled her. We're this way now, so her leaving is understandable. Family hit by nature and man's cruelty. But if she returns, well, forgive her. Sis, as a woman too, I say it's good to have a family behind you. Visit us if you can. This disguised plea for sympathy worked, drawing in older folks' pity and ramping up the hate towards me. Even neighbors pointed fingers. Seeing no response from me, my family got more outrageous. On a record-breaking day for them, I started my own account to debunk their lies. No long speeches, just the full story of that typhoon day. The kicker was the surveillance footage from my phone, showing my family planning to kick me out to marry me off even in the storm. Boom. Public opinion flipped. Everybody was stunned by their moral low. Comments multiplied, demanding the return of gifts. My family resisted, but the video was undeniable. Before they could figure something out, the platform shut them down, returning any unwithdrawn gifts. They had to refund the spent ones too. With nowhere to go, they retreated to my grandpa's old house in the country, facing local scorn. My dad and grandfather, used to being big men, struggled with the shame, venting on my mom and sisters-in-law. The first sister-in-law managed okay with Oscar. The third sister-in-law, however, got blamed for bringing up the marriage plot and leaving evidence. Frustrated, she tried to sneak away one night but got into an accident and died on the spot. My parents didn't hesitate this time, marrying her off posthumously for the dowry. When her family found out, they trashed my grandpa's place, and he had a heart attack and died. None of this affected my studies or job applications. With good security at the residence, I remained undisturbed. There was just one hiccup. My aunt was out walking the dog when my brother stole Rich, my dog, and called, demanding 3 million or else. He knew how important Rich was to me, even more than my own relatives. But I'm no fool. I called the police. Since the ransom was so high, he got locked up. In the end, I got into my dream school. With lottery winnings, I can finish my studies and settle somewhere nice. So my mom, even though she fortunately escaped from the collapsed house, has lived a visibly exhausting life. She had to take care of my dad, who was paralyzed from the waist down, look after her awkwardly dull grandson, and then later her fourth son, who was released from prison. I don't know if she ever regrets it after all. She chose her path. The ones she cares for are the men she cherishes most. One day, my donation was reported in the news. Even though my face was blurred, my mom recognized me right away. She somehow got my phone number from a friend. My parents called, crying, questioning why I didn't help the family after winning such a big lottery. My mom asked me to come home when I had the chance, saying she'd treat everyone fairly now and wouldn't play favorites anymore. I simply asked her, which home? The one where all I got was a storage room in that five-story house. She was silent after that. Later, I went studying abroad with Rich. Oh, I renamed him Lucky, and I gave myself a new name too, Fly. I'm not in debt to anyone anymore. I'm going to soar freely and ride the winds.